Hello, guys and gals, and welcome. Welcome to another episode of State of Events, which is this one is the state of the Season 7 Public Test Realm. So, the first day of the Public Test Realm was a little uneventful because, of course, the first day of the Public Test Realm had to do with the glitch with the cheat vendor, and so we didn't actually get a chance to play around with the cheat vendor, which is unfortunate. But I have had quite a bit of time now to go over things like the witch's powers, the new unique items, some of the new features like the new zone, and played around with a lot of stuff. And I got a pretty good grasp on things, including, of course, the Spiritborn nerfs. And if you're interested in that sort of thing, stay tuned. I'm sure that there will be some spoilers in here. And, of course, disclaimer. As this is a PTR, things are subject to change, so please do put feedback on the forums if you do or do not like one of the changes that have come into play. But I'm going to kind of briefly go over everything that I can right now. We're going to talk about some of this stuff. So first off, let's start with the character that I'm on. So the Necromancer. The Necromancer has two new unique items. One of them is a pair of pants that I really like, and the other one, it looks like a very interesting pair of pants, but also something that would require a more complicated build. The first one is the Casime's Legacy, which is casting Blood Wave fortifies you for 85% of your maximum life. You get 300% ultimate damage, 20% fortification damage reduction. We also get up to a 52.3% chance for Blood Wave to deal double damage, which is really nice. And then you get 18.9 Blood Wave cooldown reduction, which can go as high as 25%. All of this, of course, could be even better if you had a nice really good version of it with GAs and whatnot and masterworking and all that. This main special effect of this one is Blood Wave now forms a wave on each side of you. Both waves converge at your feet, pulling in surrounding enemies, exploding for, like a massive amount of damage, 1,192. It scales. Each time an enemy is hit by a wave, they take 10% times more damage, or 10% more damage from your Blood Waves, up to 300% in total. This one is really fun. It's really, really fun to play with. I was playing around with it earlier, and it's just honestly, it feels like you're abusing the monsters, if I'm being perfectly honest, because the monsters literally have no chance of fighting back. They are stuck in this infinite wave of just silliness, and they literally can't even do anything. You just use the ability, and the monsters are going to be stuck in this wave the entire time. Of course, it would help if I actually had the pants on. But you use it, it literally pulls all the monsters into the center. You can literally run around, use the one that gives you the blood orbs, and then you can just reset the ability instantaneously, spam it, abuse the ever-loving crap out of the monsters to the point where they literally can't fight back. It is amazing. Obviously, Blood Wave can be a blood skill. It can also be a darkness skill if you utilize the one aspect. And Blood Wave is really fun. Not only does it make lots of blood orbs, does lots of damage, crowd controls the monsters in a way that makes them literally useless, which I have to laugh at because I'm in the middle of a dungeon. I'll be fighting huge swaths of monsters, and I use Blood Wave, and the monsters are just all stuck in this little ball. And as long as you keep using Blood Wave, they don't get out of the ball. Okay, they don't get out of the ball at any point whatsoever. They're just stuck in there forever. Let's go to the HellTide real quick so I can kind of demonstrate on a larger pack. But it is rather funny, and you could definitely build around it to make an entire character around it. Now, the Season 7 seems to be, and it's leading up to, be the season of the Ultimates. And I say this because they have added some very interesting buffs to all the Ultimates for 5 ranks. So if you look at all the Ultimates, there are definitely amazing buffs that they've added. So this one in particular has a scaling multiplier based on your healthy and fortify bonus. Bone Storm has a scaling multiplier based on your critical strike damage and so forth and so on, but it's only at 5 ranks, so if you only have 5 ranks. They also added a wealth of new aspects that have to do with increasing your ultimate damage. Like this one here, which increases your ultimate damage by 18% times for every time you use your ultimate, up to 180 times. There's also the... where's the other aspect? Casting an ultimate skill increases your damage by 30% times for 8 seconds, and you also gain 4 ranks to your ultimate skill. They've done a lot of work on the ultimates to make the ultimates feel, more ultimate, and I feel like they've done a pretty good job. Let's find one of those big packs of monsters and abuse them horribly. Poor guys. Do they even have a chance? No, they don't. They're just stuck in an infinite loop of getting, like, locked in a knockback cycle. It's hilariously silly. Oh, look, here's more monsters to get stuck in my knockback cycle. It's like they're stuck in a washing machine. It's like I put them in the washing machine on the freaking the tumble cycle. I'm having entirely too much fun with this. I think there's like whole builds that could be done around the ultimates now, and it's really cool. Like Bone Storm, I think there's a whole build around Bone Storm. There's a whole build around Blood Wave. I think there's a whole build around, for instance, the Eagle Ultimate, the Spiritborn. There's a whole build around Maelstrom now. There's a whole build around Rain of Arrows. Definitely a whole build around the Call of the Ancients, and so forth and so on. With a lot of the stuff that they've done with these new aspects they've added, it's just gotten absolutely insane. The other unique, which is a little weirder for the Necromancer, and we'll cover some of the others later, is the Indira's Memory. Indira's Memory is based around something else entirely. So casting Bone Spear reduces the Blood Wave's cooldown by 2 seconds. You also get overpower damage, damage reduction while injured, maximum life bonus of up to 25%. You also get +3 to Tides of Blood, which is one of your passives. But the real meat and potatoes around this thing works is it basically turns your Bone Spear into a blood skill. Your Bone Spear now drains maximum life, 10% maximum life whenever you fire it. And on top of this, your Blood Wave is additionally a bone skill, allowing your Blood Wave to gain access to your bone skill passives, and gives you additional damage for your blood skills when you cast it. It also puts a Bone Prison, which is currently bugged, by the way, at the end of your Blood Wave, which stays forever for some reason now. I actually tested it in several locations. I thought it was just a training room at first, but it wasn't just a training room. And the Bone Prison stays at the end of your Blood Wave. So let me show you. So this is the Bone Prison. It just stays at the end of your Blood Wave. If you have the one where your Blood Wave casts multiple times, it casts multiple Bone Prisons. And this Bone Prison will never go away unless something kills it. Oh, wow, it went away. What the hell? Earlier I tested it, and I sat there forever, and it would not disappear no matter how hard I tried. And this time it makes a fool out of me. Maybe it was just something bugged within the game client. So anyway, this one in particular also works around Bone Spear. So Bone Spear becomes an ability which consumes life, and it's a lot. It's 10% of whatever your life is per shot, which the more life you have, the more it's going to consume. Now, thankfully, if you're utilizing Blood Wave, you do have the ability, obviously, to cast, to pick up all these blood orbs. And the blood orbs, of course, are going to heal you as you cast your Bone Spear, which is definitely going to be useful. You may want to look at other ways to restore your HP, though, because 10% per shot is kind of a lot, especially when you consider that as your HP increases, well, that's also is going to increase the amount of HP that it does. So if you have 10k, 10% of 10k is 1,000. If you have 20k, that's 2,000, and you know, like 100k is 10,000 per shot. Like it's basically just 10 shots. Like because it consumes 10% per shot, no matter what, it's like unless you're healing yourself in some way, unless you have some kind of like health income, it's just 10 shots. Once you have run 10 shots, you're out. Like you're just 1, 2, 3. Of course, and you also have to still spend essence on it too, which is kind of a little poopy. I'm not really entirely sure I like the fact that it costs essence and HP. Maybe it would be better if they took away the essence requirement entirely, because I feel like it costing 10% of your HP is already a lot. Let's move on to the next character. So we're going to move on to... Let's move on to the Barbarian next. The Barbarian has a really interesting new unique item. It's called, what was that? The Mountain Mountain something. I can't remember the name of it right off the top of my head, but it has a really nice effect where you can essentially use Hoda to explode the earthquakes. And I've been doing like some testing with it, playing around with different like ideas, and I hit pretty hard. I had a couple like 16, 17 billion hits. Um, and I also tried several other ways of doing it, like going through the Call to the Ancients. With Call to the Ancients is really powerful now as well. And Call of the Ancients seems like the better way to do it. I'll bring you into the training room here. And so this is the item right here. It's called the Mantle of Mountain's Fury. And it gives you a 50% times Hammer of the Ancients damage multiplier for 5 seconds after an earthquake explodes. It's got some pretty decent stats like armor, bonus to hammer to the ancients, defensive stance, which is literally just defense, and you also get a chance for earthquake to deal double damage. The main effect is down here. It says hammer of the ancients also forms a seismic line that deals its damage and slows enemies hit by 75% up to 80% for 4 seconds. Earthquakes it passes through explode for their total damage and are consumed. So what this means is that if you have an earthquake on the ground and then you use Hoda, it explodes the earthquake instantaneously, dishing out all the damage that the earthquake would have done for that particular duration. So let's give you an idea of how much crazy damage you can potentially do here. Let's pull up some elites, and let's just start wailing, shall we? So and this is just me playing around with the build, just trying to figure out what I can figure out. As you can see, I got a lot of billions there, like 2 billions, 3 billions. There was a 5.5 billion, so forth and so on. You'll see some 10 billions, 17 billions every now and then, depending. Now, this particular version, I went for more explosions over higher damage. I had another version where I was running, instead of this version, I was running a Wrath of the Berserker version, and I got more damage, but less explosions, and I wanted more explosions, because the more earthquakes you have, the more explosions that you get, because every single earthquake can be exploded that pops on the ground. And of course, you can have multiple earthquakes in multiple ways. And not only did they add this ridiculous unique item that allows you to explode your earthquakes, but they also added this aspect, which makes it even more ridiculous. It's your overpowers will spawn an earthquake for 4 seconds that deal 2,867 physical damage over 4 seconds, which isn't really that amazing. But it also says your earthquake damage is increased by 25% times for every 100 strength that you have. And as you can currently see, I'm sitting at a 750 times multiplier for my earthquakes, which is just kind of nuts. And I was playing around with various other things to see like how you can get the most damage out of the earthquakes. I'm also utilizing, of course, like the one where you stand still. So I get the ones that like spawn all the time when I stand still. And then I also grabbed like the earthquakes from the actual like Call of the Ancients as well. They actually make earthquakes. And so I could just sit there and I could just spam Hoda and I could just get like many, many explosions going off, just getting massive amounts of damage. This build is going to be really popular in Season 7, I can already tell. It looks like it's going to be one of the more powerful Barbarian builds for sure. I always like the Earthquake builds, and this one just seems insane. They added a bunch of aspects also for the earthquakes besides this one too. So there's a really interesting aspect that turns your earthquakes into fire damage. There's also another change to the aspect for the earthquakes aspect. Now instead also gives you a 50% or 60% increased earthquake damage as well. And then the aspect of Bolcathos also has a multiplier for your earthquake damage. So you get more earthquake damage here. You get more earthquake damage from the earthquake and the Bolcathos skill. They also threw you another bone with the ability to spam more earthquakes with the fire damage, which is also nice. I think it's because the Ugly Bastard Helm wasn't converting earthquakes into fire damage because it wasn't considered direct damage, so they gave this one to help with the earthquake thing, I guess. Overall, like, earthquakes got just beefed up so much. They're so ridiculous. I can't even like count the ways. It's such a fun build, and there's obviously more than just simply that with a barbarian, but I think a lot of people are going to have fun with that. There's also the ultimates, as I talked about earlier, like this season of the ultimates. Like all the ultimates got something really neat in terms of like what they can do and how they can scale damage. And so if you're trying to get like a really awesome like Iron Maelstrom or Call of the Ancients or Wrath of the Berserker, like if you try to Iron Maelstrom build with a new amulet, it's probably going to work now. Like it probably will work at this point. Let's move on to the next character, and let me show you some more cool stuff that they added into the game. So the Spiritborn. Now the Spiritborn, I don't want to say that the Spiritborn got nerfed because I feel like the Spiritborn is exactly where the Spiritborn should have been without all the ridiculous bugs that were in place. But all the ridiculous bugs are in fact gone. Resolve stacks are gone completely from the utility tree. From the tempering, you can no longer put resolve stacks on your equipment, so they just took that away entirely. On top of that, the viscous shield bug has been fixed. The redirected force bug, interdiction bug has been fixed. I'm pretty sure that all of the bugs have been fixed. I don't think they touched Felsu's Slayer, but that because of the unintended interactions with a lot of the other stuff, Felsu's Slayer was just ridiculous. And I think fixing all the bugs has pretty much fixed that as well, because now it's not getting fed into like absolute insanity from all of the bugged equipment. And overall, the Spiritborn is not any weaker than any other classes. It's still a very strong class, and I think a lot of people are going to have fun with it. Speaking of the new item for the class, we have the Sustained War Crozier, which is this new ridiculous item that has to do with focus and potency skills. And as you can see, I already triple masterwork mine with plus 12. Yes, you heard me. Plus 12 focus skills. My freaking focus skills are sitting at like ridiculously high levels. Like I've got level rank 27 Soar, 27 Ravager. I had level like 35 Toxic Skin earlier when I was playing around with it. It does have a chance for potency skills to deal double damage, and it has a pretty hefty amount of life dexterity on it, which is not bad. The special effect on it is pretty crazy, though. It's your focus skills benefit from all their upgrades, and they increase the damage of your potency skills by 20% times for 8 seconds, up to a total of 200% times. Now, what this means is that you don't have to spend points on the actual, like, passives, which is crazy. It actually saves you passive points. So like when you have Ravager, you know how normally you would go grab like Enhanced Ravager and probably like Replenishing Ravager, or if you had Vortex, you might grab Enhanced Vortex and Replenishing Vortex for like the cooldown reduction, or you might grab Soar and then grab the Enhanced Soar and then maybe grab a Replenishing Soar for the vulnerability. Well, you don't have to do none of that. So the way that this item works is it literally gives you all of the passives for the focus skills when you put the item on. Now you do have to go out of town to see this because it doesn't show you in town. This is another one of those things that it won't show you. But notice how it shows me now that I have all the modifiers, right? If I go back in town, it doesn't show me the modifiers at all. It just pretends I don't have the passives. But when you use the ability, it does in fact give you all the passives. You notice that I have the donut ring. Like, so that is one of the passives, and I don't have any points in that. So it saves you literally multiple passive points, depending on how many focus skills you potentially use with this. Anywhere between, of course, 2 for one focus skill, which you're going to have at least one with this particular item, up to a maximum of, what is that, like 2, 4, 6, 8. So you can save yourself a maximum of 8 passive points here, which is going to be pretty dang freaking awesome because you can spend those somewhere else. On top of that, it gives you such a large amount of skill bonuses to skills in the focus tree that, like, even with just 1 point in the skill, you're still going to be looking at relatively high level abilities, which is really nice. The other thing that it does is it beefs up a potency skill, right? So if you have a potency skill, and there's tons of different potency skills, like you can use Razor Wings, you could use Payback, you could use Rushing Claw, you could use Touch of Death, and you can, of course, get tons of extra damage through these abilities. Right now I have set up a Razor Wings character. I can show you briefly how this functions. So essentially what I'm doing is I spam my focus skills, of course. So I have my focus skills being spammed, and then I'm also utilizing the Razor Wings itself to get tons of extra damage, and basically build those multipliers. and it actually works pretty well. It's capable of like pit 70, pit up to pit 80. I think I cleared a pit 80, but it was a little rough. But this is just like a mock version. I was just slapping together like whatever I could just to see if I could make it work, and it works very well. If you ever wanted to build like a really awesome build around a potency skill like Razor Wings, Rushing Claw, Touch of Death, or Payback, this would make a really epic version of that. In fact, last season we made a Toxic Skin build, and I didn't do it on the PTR because I already know that it works. It's a very powerful build. It involves Toxic Skin and Rushing Claw. And essentially what you do is you stack up as much damage as you can on Toxic Skin, and then of course you utilize Rushing Claw to spread the Toxic Skin all over the place. But the interesting thing here is with the interaction is you would be spamming Toxic Skin to get the damage bonus for Rushing Claw as well. And then you would also build into Rushing Claw's damage, which is not something that I had originally had considered with that particular output. But with the way that this item works, you could potentially have both, which would be rather interesting in the way that it functions. Another really big change that they made for the Spiritborn is the Wuxie Nokpa. Now, I always knew the Wuxie Nokpa was going to be an amazing item. I called it from like the first day, despite the fact that Max Roll had ranked it as F rank. And even in its previous version, it was probably one of the most powerful items in the game if used correctly. However, they increased it from a 100% potency to a 200% potency now, which is absolutely insane. This means that you can potentially have, if you're using, say, Loyalty Helmet and another item, you can bring your bonus on your Spirit Hall up to 400% of normal. So let me show you. So here we have the Jaguar Spirit Hall as it is normally. And the Jaguar Spirit Hall is 15% over 0.5 seconds. If I change to the Jaguar, I will now have 15%, 15 times for 30% over 0.5 seconds, right? Then if I utilize the specific ultimate for Wuxie Nokpa, so I have to, with Wuxie Nokpa, you have to use the ultimate in correspondence with the one that you want, essentially, right? So the Spirit Hall that you want. And then when you use it, you get a temporary bonus of 200% to that particular Spirit Hall. So in this particular case, I'm going to use the Jaguar Spirit Hall, and now I have a 60% of all damage that I have dealt over 0.5 seconds. So my Jaguar Spirit Hall just went from 15% to 60%. And any of them work this way. So if you utilize the Eagle and you swap to both Eagle, or actually, let's do one Eagle real quick. So one Eagle is casting an Eagle skill grants 4 seconds of Storm Feathers and 8 Storm Feathers over 125% damage and vulnerable for 5 seconds. We double that, essentially, when we add the second one, and it goes to 8, 250% and 10 seconds, right? Then, if we add in the Eagle Ultimate, now we're getting even more. So, like, we throw the Eagle Ultimate into the mix, and let's go ahead and cast him real quick. Now we're up to 16 seconds of the Eagle granting skill, the movement speed. We have 500% lightning damage on the ability, and vulnerable over 20 seconds. That's right, you heard it. 20-second vulnerable time. The monsters are just vulnerable for 20 seconds. It's like, it's infinite, essentially. Like, they're never not going to be vulnerable. And then that's not the end of it. Like, you can do this for any of them. So if you wanted to do this for Gorilla, Gorilla is normally only, 100% Thorns, 5% maximum life, and 30% barrier, right? Up to 30% barrier. So if you change this to double Gorilla, of course, you can get 200% and 60%. So 10% maximum life with 60% barrier. If you utilize the Gorilla Ultimate, which is actually like easily spammable, by the way. The Gorilla Ultimate's one of the easiest ones to spam. Now you're at 400% Thorns. Freaking 20% maximum life as barrier every time you hit a monster, up to 120%. I don't even know how that works. How do you have 120% of your maximum life as barrier? That seems insane. But you're getting 20% barrier basically every time you hit a target, which is ridiculous. Get out of my face. And then we can switch over to the Centipede. Now, the Centipede got an overhaul because it now poisons targets, which there is a little bit of a bug with, and I did report it, so hopefully they fix it before it goes live. But as you can see, it reduces the damage of monsters, slows them, and also poisons them over 6 seconds with a stack of a maximum of 8 times, right? So if we change this to double Centipede, we are now at 420, 140% poison over 8 times. And then we just need to cast our beautiful Centipede ultimate. And by casting our Centipede ultimate, we are now at 8% damage reduction, 40% slow, 280% poison damage over 6 seconds. So as you can see, you can beef these things up ridiculously. Like, it doesn't even make any sense. The amount of increased multiplier to the actual spirit halls they've given through Wuxie Nakpa is insane. It's definitely going to be, in combination with the sustained War Crozier, one of the more powerful weapons of next season. I would definitely keep your eyes on that one. The Spiritborn is not all, though. Let's take a look at some of the other classes. So we have gone over Necromancer. We went over Barbarian, Spiritborn. Let's take a look at the Sorceress. So the Sorceress is a hot topic because she has 2 items that affect ball lightning, and the ball lightning does look really interesting. Unfortunately, I do have to inform you that the nerf that they made to Sorceress is a little rough, and it has brought the damage down pretty significantly. Basically what they did is they took away the ability to gain access to Devouring Blaze, because Devouring Blaze is a pyromancy only skill now. Instead of it being the monsters are burning, now it's specifically only pyromancy skills, which is a little unfortunate. And they also took away the ability for Firebolt to make the monsters bleeding through the actual enchantment effect, which is pretty stupid too. So they basically just slapped every single ice and lightning sorceress in the face and said, meh. Only the fire sorceresses have access to Devouring Blaze now, which was a pretty huge nerf. I mean, I can understand why they did it, because they don't want every single character in the game getting access to the fire passives, even if they're not actually a fire sorceress. But I think the nerf to the fire bolt enchantment probably would have been enough. I didn't think they had to go so far as to nerf the Devouring Blaze ability itself. But I can understand their logic behind it. I just really wish they'd given us some kind of alternative, in the process. So the 2 new uniques for the Sorceress are Orkun's Catalyst, which is a really powerful item that essentially is just built around the original gravitational aspects. It says ball lightning can be cast while moving, which is really nice. So before you couldn't cast ball lightning while you were moving, which did make it kind of clunky. Now you can cast ball lightning while you're moving, so it doesn't really matter. Which makes it a lot easier to use. As you can see, it functions very similarly to the way the ball lightning does. It does have a couple new unique effects, which is, first off, it does have the, set up specifically for ball lightning. So it has the ball lightning projectiles cast twice, the ball lightning bonuses. It does have a damage reduction for each ball lightning active of up to 1.1%. This isn't really a perfect version, so the stats aren't really the greatest. These are also probably subject to change in the future, so I don't want to make entire unique item videos around something that's may or may not be correct. It does have a really nice bonus damage of 180% of ball lightning's damage in this static field around you. So essentially what it does is it kind of creates a static field as you're casting everything. And makes it so that the static field is dishing out damage as well, as long as you have ball lightnings active. So you're not just getting the damage from the ball lightnings itself, it's also damage from the static field, which is also interesting. So there's an added layer of how the ability works, which is kind of cool. It also gives you unhindered as long as the field is active, so it's kind of based around making you move as much as possible. It is a really good unique item. If you were interested in the ball lightning builds, it's very fun. The next one is the Strike of Stormhorn. This is the one I was most interested in, but it does have some issues, and I'll talk about those. This one has an interesting effect called Super Ball Lightning, so it changes your Ball Lightning into Super Ball Lightning, and it also changes all of your Ball Lightning projectiles cast twice to apply to Super Ball Lightning. My apologies, dry throat. Whew. So how this one works is kind of strange. It increases the projectile speed of Ball Lightning, which if you look at the original Ball Lightning, let's look at the original. The original Ball Lightning looks like this. It's kind of slow. It does pierce, and it has a relatively long range. So like if you look at how far it's capable of going, it does go pretty far. Like it goes all the way to the chest over here pretty much. And I actually rather liked the way the original one worked. It was just not really as much damage as you would hope it would be. With the way that this new item works, it's kind of odd. So it says Ball Lightning splashes on contact, which kind of kills the Ball Lightning, and I'm not really sure I like that. I wish it still pierced. I like the splash, but I wish it still pierced. Because the splash kind of kills it, and then it doesn't really do as much damage. I almost feel like the regular Ball Lightnings do more damage, with the exception of the multiplier they added, just simply because they pierce through the targets and they keep going, as opposed to instantly being deleted. They also stun for 1 second if it reaches its maximum range. The maximum range is kind of short. I just showed you the maximum range of the Ball Lightning, and I'll show you the maximum range of these Super Balls. The Super Ball Lightnings are larger, deal 100% times more damage, and have a higher lucky hit chance, and its stun duration is increased to 3 seconds. So let's put this on and we'll play around with it. So first off, let's compare these. So I'm going to stand right here, and we're going to cast the regular Ball Lightnings. And you see the regular Ball Lightnings could basically make it to the healing well. It's pretty far away. And the distance on them, as well as the piercing effect on them, is very nice. Now, if you put on the Super Ball Lightnings and you cast those, they have a much faster speed, but they also don't really reach as far. When they reach their maximum duration or maximum distance, they just automatically collapse, and then they fire off like that wave at the end. Which is, it's kind of neat, I guess. And if the Super Ball wave does kind of reach the same length as the others, which you don't get a Super Lightning or Super Ball every single time. As you can see, most of the balls that you fire off are not Super Ball Lightnings. Most of them are just regular Ball Lightnings, and they don't really go nearly as far as the original Ball Lightnings do. And then it gets complicated, even more complicated. So if you grab multiple dummies, and let's say you have multiple dummies sitting here and you shoot the Ball Lightnings, it just immediately collapses. So if it hits any target, the Ball Lightning is immediately gone. And you do get the little waves, which is nice, but the Ball Lightnings are just immediately deleted. I'm not really sure how I feel about it. The extra damage on it is nice. Don't get me wrong. The extra damage is nice. But I think it would be cool if they still pierced. I don't see any reason to destroy them. Like, let them pierce through. Like, let them create the wave, and then they don't have to create additional waves afterward. But just let them pierce through and, like, continue on their way. I feel like that would be better, and especially visually. I think it's, like, one of the things that's bugging me is it's not as visually pleasant or pleasing as the original. And I know visuals isn't really the biggest thing in the world, but look at the original one and tell me that doesn't look, like, just visually pleasing. Like having this like ridiculous line of Ball Lightnings just traveling toward the enemy, right? This like just a train of Ball Lightnings going toward the enemy, right? It's just very visually pleasing. And then when you put this on, it just doesn't really quite have the same like pleasantness to it. And the thing is that if you're really far away from the pack and you're firing them off, it kind of looks okay. But anytime you're close to the enemy, like, because of the way that they just disappear, a lot of the times you don't even get to see the Ball Lightnings. Like, they're just gone. Like, if you're standing really close to the enemy, you don't even see them. What Ball Lightnings? You kind of get what I'm saying? Like, what Ball Lightnings? There are no Ball Lightnings. Like, you're just too close and they're just immediately disintegrating. That's why I think it would be cool if they, like, continued on their path anyway, like, just dishing out damage as they went. But it does seem like a powerful build and something that you could potentially build around. I did give some feedback on this. I don't like the shorter range, and I also don't like the way that they don't pierce. But other than that, it does seem like a fun build that you could create for Season 7. I'm a little bit worried about the lack of damage, though. It doesn't seem like Sorceress is really quite the same since they took away her devastating or her fire damage passives. I mean, I logged into this character as an example. This was my Charge Bolt character, and I tried to play this Charge Bolt character, and she was capable of like pit 80s and up. And I tried to throw her in an 80, and she was struggling. She was actually struggling in 3, which was atrocious. I went down to Torment 3, and she was still struggling a little bit, which was a little rough. I'm not exactly sure why her damage went down so much, and I would have had to have like gone into a deep dive to try and figure it out, but it's so much stuff that I want to test that I don't really have time for all that. Moving on to the Rogue. I think that's the last one, right? We've covered everybody. Covered the Necromancer, covered the Barbarian, covered the Spiritborn. So let's go to my beautiful Rogue. She's wearing the Rogue cosmetic from Diablo 1. The Rogue unique item is interesting, but it also I don't know exactly what to think about it. I'm less excited about the new unique item, which is called Assassin's Stride. The special effect being that it beefs up Shadow Imbuement, and it also gives you a bonus to your mobility skills, basically increasing their potence through Shadow Imbuement. So, like, you get a permanent Shadow Imbuement on your mobility skills, and then on top of that, like, damaging an elite or a boss with the mobility skill has a chance to trigger a free Shadow Imbuement explosion, which is really cool. I can kind of show you this real quick. Let's use Dash. Dash works really well. Now, the Shadow Imbuement Explosion is a nice little pump of damage, and that usually happens when the monster dies, like if you have Shadow Imbuement on them. So this gives you a way to apply the Shadow Imbuement to them when they're obviously not dead, which is nice. So basically, when you attack, you notice that I just get like a free Shadow Imbuement. I'm actually more excited about this particular aspect, which is enemies infected by Shadow Imbuement take 100% times of its damage every second. Shadow Imbuement deals 100% times increased damage. This thing is insane. I was playing around with this, and like even just like putting Shadow Imbuement on a monster, you'll get like hundreds of thousands of damage just for applying Shadow Imbuement, like nothing else. Like this isn't even me buffing up my character or anything. This is literally me just applying Shadow Imbuement, no skill, no nothing. I'm just applying a Shadow Imbuement directly to the monster, and as you can see, the monster's taking like almost a million damage, like relatively quickly. What it's doing is it's taking all of the damage of Shadow Imbuement and it's applying it to the monster over like a period of time, once per second over 6 seconds, and it just ticks like repeatedly. You see, I just did a million damage to the monster there. This right here, like I've always liked Shadow Imbuement and how it works, but it's never been like the most amazing ability out there. And this fixes Shadow Imbuement for me. I was playing around with this and utilizing some different tactics, and like for instance, I just used Rain of Arrows, and you'll see that Rain of Arrows implies Shadow Imbuement. And as soon as it implies Shadow Imbuement, the monsters are literally taking like the full brunt of the Shadow Imbuement, just from Rain of Arrows. And it's absolutely amazing. I can't talk it up enough. I think a lot of people are really going to love this aspect, just simply because number one, it makes Shadow Imbuement do so much more damage, and number two, it kind of like takes you off of the poison train. You know, everybody's been on like the poison imbuement train for the longest time, and it might actually be time to build an entire character around Shadow Imbuement because of this. They also added in another aspect. Well, they changed the corruption aspect and made it so that it actually applies regardless of any kind of like special conditions. So you get a 45% multiplier there for free. Um, and I think it was one more that they added. I can't be 100% sure. That one, that's an oldie. Apparently, it's been in the game for forever, and I didn't know that it worked this way. Goes to show you, not everybody knows everything. I was completely unaware you could just apply your imbuements directly to the target without even actually using an ability. Mm. And it works surprisingly well, too. You can even use it with cold imbuement, and you can freeze the targets, like this. Of course, that was an abysmal failure. Stand right here. It doesn't have, like, the largest radius. Oh, yeah, these are bosses. They don't freeze. What am I doing? We'll go to elites. Boom! Like that. It's pretty cool. I mean, overall, I'm not entirely sure the rogue got like a massive number of changes. There's definitely some good changes. Some of the aspects that they added are definitely really nice, like this one specifically. And I think people are really going to enjoy it. If you want to take a look at the full patch notes for the rogue, there's definitely some changes in there that could be interesting. I'm not entirely sold on the booch my shelf, but they could be really interesting to add those free explosions in. The explosions actually do a lot of damage. Like I will give them that. Like when you use the explosions to hit the targets, the explosions themselves can dish out a rather large amount of damage. My main issue is just that how do I put it? Like you don't really need to cast Shadow Imbuement multiple times. It's not one of those abilities that you get like a massive amount of damage of for spamming it repeatedly. When it comes to like this new dot thing. So I was less enthused about like having an extra way to spam Shadow Imbuement than I was at having like this really cool way to apply this like crazy dot damage to the targets. Um, the explosion themselves, like just the explosion, is kind of nice. If it was a 100% chance, it would be way better. And I do only have a 68, but um, like the explosion itself isn't enough. I don't know, like to warrant taking up the boot slot, especially when there's other boots that you could potentially be using, like maybe Beastfall, or you could be utilizing like Rakonovs or something like that to get extra non-physical damage, which helps scale, of course, the new key passive, which is the Alchemical Advantage. Alchemical Advantage scales based on your poison, shadow, and cold, and non-physical damage gives you a huge amount of poison, shadow, and cold. So you can get a massive bonus through that. I don't know. What else can we talk about? We can also talk about the witch powers. So the witch powers are really cool. I think I forgot the druid. That's what I forgot. The druid. That's okay. I saved the best for last. We're gonna go to moose. Moose. And we can talk about the witch powers while we're at moose. So the unique item for the druid. What was the unique item for the druid? I can't even remember. It was the lupine ferocity one, I think. I'm gonna be honest with you. I looked at it and it wasn't really like the most amazing thing I'd ever seen. I was actually kind of not excited to try it out. Uh, it's called Malefic Crescent. It gives you willpower bonus, werewolf critical strike damage, movement speed while shapeshifted into a werewolf, feral aptitude, which I think has to do with it's like a werewolf specific bonus. I can't remember. I think is that the one where it's the no digitated grade is the movement speed. Feral aptitude is this one. Yeah, that's the generic damage bonus while you're healthy. It also gives you some movement speed, or if you're above 100% movement speed, you get another buff. The main effect on this is the value of your lupine's ferocity critical strike damage is increased 150% when consecutively critical striking. So it's an amulet that's based around the idea of setting up your werewolf and then getting 100% crit chance. Because if you have 100% crit chance, you never don't crit. That's right, I said never don't crit. And then you get this bonus every single time you crit. So you're just going to get a huge critical strike multiplier added into your overall damage output, which does seem pretty strong. But it's just generic. It's just really generic. And I don't know. I don't know why I didn't want to test it, but it just It seemed like it would be powerful if you built around it. I just wasn't really interested in doing a werewolf at this particular point. I know it's kind of a cop out since I tested like every other character, but I'm not really a big fan of like generic item gives you huge X power bonus type do janks. So what I opted for instead was I made a summon character and I utilized all the witch powers to do a summon craziness. So these are the witch powers, and let me move myself over to the other side because I am in the way of the witch powers. We go over here with the snowman. Hello, Mr. Snowman. All right, so the witch powers are interesting. You have one unique witch power, which there's only a couple unique witch powers. There's the Doom Orb, Vengeful Spirit, the Cycle, and the Piranado. There's some pretty cool powers in here. I'm not entirely sure at how ridiculous the damage is on them, but there are some unique effects that you can take advantage of to get you bonuses that you might necessarily want to look at. And I'm taking advantage of some of them. I'm going to hover over each one so you guys can see them all, and then I'm going to like start talking about specific ones. All right. So what did I do? I went with summons. So one of the things that they changed in this season is the summon just general changes. And this, of course, covers the Necromancer as well. So we'll be talking about that in inclusion. Everything that is considered a summon has been marked as a summon now. They're no longer companions. They're no longer skeletons. They're no longer golems. Like everything is basically just summons. And I was like, okay, well, that's cool. And then I looked in the witch powers and I was like, oh, look, the frog has the summon mod. That's pretty neat. And then I was like, oh, look, the freaking, like fire bats have a summon modifier on them. That's really neat. So does that mean they get my damage? And the answer is yes. Like if you have anything that affects a summon, if it's a generic effect for a summon, it does in fact affect the firebat servants. It also affects the poison frog servant. And then I looked at the unique powers, and there was a unique power that was also a summon, the vengeful spirit. And I was like, oh, well, this is really cool. I was like, so I can get like some bat summons, I can get a vengeful spirit summon, I can get a poison frog summon, and I can do all sorts of cool stuff. And this is what I'm talking about. Like when when I was looking at that amulet, I was like, that's just damage bonus. Like who cares about that? And then I got over here and I was like, oh, I can have a frog and I can have some bats and I can have a freaking like floating skull that follows me around. Like I'm sold. And then they got me with the zinger. They got me with a zinger, and the zinger is this one right here. It's the grow power. After casting an ultimate skill, your servants, minions, and companions are empowered with dark magics, growing larger in size and dealing 45% bonus damage, gaining 100% critical strike chance for 10 seconds. Yeah, they get big. They get big. They could have made that power, and they could have made it without the growing part. And without the growing part, it would have been okay. But like, the growing part just made it so much cooler. Let's just go into like apparently, I only have Torment 20. What the hell? Um, let's just go into a baby one real quick, and I'll show you like them growing really big. I think it's hilarious. Everything grows too, not just the wolves, but also the spirit wolves grow. The frog grows, like the freaking everything grows. So all I have to do is just use my ultimate, and boom, mega sized wolves and mega sized everything. Now I got big old honking wolves and big old honking spirit wolves and stuff, and I got this big old frog, this big monster frog. And then when 10 seconds is up, they all turn back to normal size, and it's disappointing. So that's why I went with Cataclysm, because I wanted to get like permanent uptime on my ultimate. I need to make it even faster. And basically my army here is just massive. I mean, I don't know how many wolves I've got, but it's a lot. I don't know how many werewolves I've got, but it's a lot. Like especially, I think I'm missing that one aspect that makes it so that I can gain an additional couple wolves every certain number. Oh man, I forgot I didn't have that one. That's upsetting. So I could have even more wolves basically. I also have all the spirit wolves. I've got the frog. I've got the bats. I've got the skull. That's my little skull right there. See him floating around. He looks like a bone spirit. And I don't know. It's just really neat. It's really fun. I'm using the ravens that have the lightning ravens. They're actually fixed now and they work properly. I'm using the storm pants so that my wolves are storm wolves because I'm building into like the thunderstruck multipliers and things like that to get additional damage. Um, Overall, it's been a blast. Like the minions just run around murdering everything. I don't even really like pay attention to it. It's great. All these little buffs that are inside the witches thing are really fun. They put a lot of thought into these, and I think that people are going to enjoy them. There's a couple in here that are just like generic X bonus damage or whatever for the people who don't want to play around with the fun stuff. But you know, there's like an aura that actually like gives you like a poison aura when you use it. The bats come down and dish out fire damage, and they stun enemies. The decay augmentation makes it so that your witchcraft effects deal more damage, and also you get a when your damage over time effects exceed 85% of the target's life, they die immediately, which is really cool. And then you get like a damage over time multiplier. Um, there's some other interesting ones in here. Like this one right here is Abyssal Resonance. Makes it so that every time you spend 250 resource, you dish out shadow damage. And then when you explode, it explodes. And if you do this 3 times, you get 3 stacks. On the 3rd explosion, it pulls all the enemies in before detonating, which is really cool. Like each one of these is pretty well thought out. Like some of these just have some really interesting little fun effects that you can do. Like the lifelink one causes you to link your life to nearby enemies, and then you do like a massive amounts of damage to them when you use your defensive macabre or subterfuge skill. There's curses, there's all sorts of stuff. And then that's not even the end of it. So like once you start getting into these powers, okay? This is just the first thing. And then there's a whole set of gems that you can potentially use to enhance them. Now, the sample gems that they showed off in the live stream were kind of wimpy. They were just like generic bonuses, and I don't know why they decided to show off those specifically because there was a lot better ones in here. Like the one I'm using right now is for each rank in your slotted unique witch power, you gain 3% damage reduction and 1% to all res. Then I also have your unique witch powers deal 40% increased damage, which is, of course, referring to my summon. And then I'm also utilizing your non-unique Eldritch Witch powers, gain 25% potency, which is, of course, referring to my, Frog Servant. I got my Grow power. I'm utilizing, getting a bonus to my Fire Bat servants and so much and so on, which is really what I'm doing. I think it's just the Eldritch ones though, so it's just the Fire Bat servants, and I think that's it. I guess I might want to take that one out. But they have a lot of interesting effects in here. There's things where you get more critical strike chance of movement. These are like more of the generic ones. You get more barrier, more thorns, more fortify, which could be interesting for a thorns build. This one is while you have an active aura, you pull in nearby enemies, and so forth and so on. There's just some fun ones in here that you can play around with, and they definitely work interestingly with the way that your build is set up. So like you play around with those witch powers, and then you pick the gems that kind of like complement the powers that you've chosen, which is neat. Now, speaking of the witches and the witch powers, we can't talk about them without talking about the zone that they're in. So if you played during the Season of Blood, and you remember the blood zones back in, I think it was like Season 2, wasn't it? Everybody loved the blood zones, the vampire zones. It's like the vampire zones all over again, except there's a bunch of really cool things in here that you can interact with, little quests that you can do and whatnot. They also added a vendor specifically so that you could get access to your whispers on the go. It's this little guy right here, this crow. And if you utilize this vendor, when you have a whisper quest, you can turn in your whisper quest basically anywhere. Well, of course, if there's a crow. But as long as you're in this zone and you see one of the crows, you can just turn in your Whisper quest without going back to the Whisper tree. There's some really interesting quests in here, or rather like events in here that you can do. Some of them have to do with clicking on these little crazy exposed roots. Now, sometimes the exposed roots will drop you loot, sometimes they will cause crazy events to happen, and occasionally they will grow and start spawning massive numbers of monsters and turning into bigger events than the original events were. There's also protection quests, like for instance this one, which is a person who's running along asking for your help. You basically just have to follow them around in the patrol and keep them alive while they do their patrol, which is it's sometimes spicy. I've died a couple times in here, but of course I also have been playing like brand new characters instead of ones that were already established, so there's also that. Whispers is the whole theme here. So tons and tons of whispers. You will be turning in whispers by the dozens, by the trozens. I don't even know what that word is. And that's basically just how this hold zone functions, is you're just continually doing these events. Every one of the events has a whisper tied to it. Completing the whisper, obviously, you run over to the Raven, turn in the Raven, and get your box, and then you complete another whisper. Which is really cool. They also added a bunch of really new awesome runes, and I'm using one of them right now. It's called the Nagu rune. Maintain at least one active summon for 5 seconds, gaining offering for each up to 6. Summon one at a time. And it says summon a spirit wolf, so I'm using that one, right? You can see how many spirit wolves I currently have active. I've got a lot, right? A lot of spirit wolves. I'm basically, because I have many summons, right? And the more summons I have, the more that it works. There's also some other interesting quests around here. Like there's this crazy little... I haven't figured out what these braziers do. They kind of like turn off when you get too close to them. I don't know what they do. There's captives that you have to take. This guy right here teleports around like after you kill him, and you have to follow him multiple times. It's some sort of like cursed monster. And every time you kill him, what happens is he just relocates. And as he relocates, you have to follow him around, killing him multiple times until eventually you manage to succeed the area. As you can see, some of the stuff in here is a little spicy. That was a little spicy. There's also these little frogs that you can chase around. I mean, it is a lot of little fun things. There's some animals that you can escort back to the tree. This is one of the escort ones. On the map, occasionally, kind of like the Maiden, you'll see an event occur. As you can see over here, this is one of the events. Let me see if I can make it over there without dying. Oh, dear Lord Jesus. It's a lot of monsters in here. These are some of the frogs. You click on them. They run in various directions. You follow them. Tons of monsters spawn from them. Whether or not you get what you're looking for, it's not always the case. Looks like we were just a little bit too late for that event. It looks like it's already over. But as you can see, they definitely do spawn. And you can run out there and you can do the events. This area is absolutely insane with monsters, though. In fact, there were certain times where it felt like the monsters were never going to stop showing up. And it has to do with these little things that appear on the ground. And I can't quite... This guy is not set up properly. I can't quite like explain it to you. Let me see if I can find some of them. What is going on over here? Is there like 70,000 monsters in this one zone? Everybody's got a defensive thing on too. Just die. How about that? Just die. No, 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 no. No, no, no. I'm actually going to press buttons now. Let's go. Come on. Come on. Why are there so many monsters here? Bloodthirsty Lichen Terror. Dude, this area is spicy as all get out. Okay. Alright. You guys done? They done. Alright, so when you start killing monsters, these little things appear on the ground all over the place. And I think part of the reason why you end up with so many monsters is because people start clicking on the little things, and each one of them starts spawning monsters, and they can eventually spawn more monsters, and it's almost like a chain reaction. As you start clicking on these little like pustules, almost I'd call them, it just starts making more and more monsters. And it's like an endless loop of monsters that just seems to never stop coming until eventually either you're dead or they're dead, one or the other. I felt like sometimes I was sitting there for like 20 minutes just killing stuff. It's a really fun area, though. Very akin to the vampire area from Season 2. Super, super like it. This is one of the pustules right here. Little exposed roots. As you can see, this time it grew, and when it grew, a bunch of monsters came out. And as you kill the monsters, you'll see more exposed roots on the ground. And as you click on the exposed routes, you constantly get more and more monsters to the point of absurdity. It's really fun. It's super fun area. I love the fact that there's just so much chaos in this area, and you never know what the hell's going on. The events start overlapping. All sorts of crazy stuff starts happening. Now let's go to the tree. And speaking of crazy, they overhauled the tree. So the whole tree got a big overhaul. Like they added NPCs, they spread it out a little bit, they made it bigger. I was always kind of upset that the Whispering Tree wasn't an actual like place that you could go. And yeah, well, it's a place that you can go now. Like it's a whole area. They've got like the rings and amulets vendor up here. They've got the alchemist. There's the blacksmith. The occultist is here. They got the coven jeweler, the healer, the purveyor of curiosities is here, and there's the whole seasonal area. This is where you actually go to barter for your powers. There's also a board where you can do the quests and whatnot for the seasonal elements, and you can collect boxes that have rewards in them. Um, and of course, the tree is still here, so that hasn't changed. The tree is still here, and it looks all like mutated and stuff now because it's got like the coven stuff in it. Then there's the armory. So the armory is pretty cool. I did some testing on it, and you basically just save your build. Once you save your build to the tree, you'll notice that there's this special little like Yu-Gi-Oh looking symbol on your equipment. I swear it looks like the Yu-Gi-Oh symbol. Am I wrong? Yu-Gi-Oh symbol. It does kind of look like the Yu-Gi-Oh symbol. I'm not wrong. It does. See? It does look like the Yu-Gi-Oh symbol. So there's this little Yu-Gi-Oh symbol on your equipment, and once the Yu-Gi-Oh equipment is on there, Yu-Gi-Oh symbol's on there, it lets you know that that's in your armory. So if you throw this in your stash, for instance, with all your other crap, like say you take off one of your pairs of gloves or something, and it gets lost in there, you know, amidst all the other legendaries that you have in your Dojank, you will be notified essentially through that symbol, like, hey, this is an armory item, don't delete this, which I think is a really good feature. I did test out a couple things with this, and one of the things that I tested was number one, does it switch gems? Or will it switch your runes? Like, does it save your gems or your runes? And the answer is no. So, despite the fact that it shows on here your gems and your runes, if you change the gems and the runes in the item, it does in fact change the gems and the runes on the actual piece of equipment, which is kind of stupid. So, like, let's say for instance, I were to go to the jeweler right now. Oh, where's the jeweler? He's up here, right? Yes, there's the jeweler. So we go to the jeweler, and let's just make something stupid like a royal amethyst. And I'm going to put the royal amethyst in my piece of equipment. Once I do that, and I go over to the armory, you'll see that it updated the armory to add the gem in there. I'm not really sure why that is. Another thing that I found out is if you have this piece of equipment on another character, it will not take the piece of equipment from another character. I kind of hoped that it would, even though I knew it wouldn't. It was like a false hope of mine. But it doesn't take items from other characters. It just marks them as missing. So, for instance, if I were to, say, for instance, drop this piece of equipment, you'll notice that it shows a exclamation point there saying that this particular item is missing, and you do not have it anymore. Now, if you pick it back up, it's back in there. It only pulls things really from your stash and your equipment here. It won't pull things from other characters, which is a little bit of a disappointment. So that means that you're going to have to remember to at least, you know, take off your Shako and put it in your stash. You won't have to find it in your stash, but you will have to take it off. The unfortunate side effect of it not removing and changing the gems is a bit of a hassle. I don't really know exactly how they could potentially do that, but I don't know. Maybe, maybe not. Um, I think that's pretty much it. I did leave some feedback on here about it that you can't delete a loadout. It should have a delete button, I think, but it doesn't. It does let you rename it, so you can rename it Boris. if you want to, and that way you have loadouts. These loadouts are not cross character compatible, so I tested that as well. That was another thing I wanted to check. So I did. I have two barbarians, for instance, and I saved a loadout for one barbarian, and I wanted to see if maybe I could like copy the loadout to the other barbarian, but the answer is no. So the loadouts are not like cross character compatible. Of course, you wouldn't really necessarily need to make two barbarians if you had the loadout system in the first place. But I thought I was just thinking like as a way of like being able to transfer the build from one character to another without having to go through the process of redoing everything. But I guess it doesn't really work that way. Um, it would be cool if they did. Like if they had like a little button where you could just like transfer loadout to, such and such character. That would be neat. Anything else? Anything else? I'm sure that there's probably something that I missed. But it looks like it's going to be a really good season. I don't know when season 7 is going to be launching. Obviously, like a lot of you guys, I'm going to be hopping over to Path of Exile 2 and playing that for the launch. And I guess we'll see season 7 whenever season 7 launches, which may or may not be months from now. What was the launch day for season 6? Let's take a look real quick. So, season 6. Do, 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 do. Do, 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 do. I'm pulling up my list of live streams so I can do it that way. That's the easiest way. That's the easiest way for me, anyway. So it was on October 6th, so that's October to November, November to December. So we're looking at like January, late January to like maybe early January to late January before we end up in season 7 anyway. So we've got like a solid month and a half of like Path of Exile 2 before we even get into the idea of hopping over to season 7. I mean, that sounds good to me. A full month of Path of Exile 2, and then we get into Diablo 4 season 7. Maybe I might go do a little bit of Diablo 2 season 9 as well. We'll see. Anyway, I hope you are interested or you liked this state of season 7 for rather state of the PTR for Diablo 4. Fumbling over my own words there. I think it's going to be a good season. I think they added a lot of interesting things, a lot of interesting mechanics. The Spiritborn finally being balanced is going to make the game feel more fun because you won't have to worry about like feeling like you're not keeping up with everybody else. Because the Spiritborn is definitely like in the same league at the moment as the other classes. As always, I do appreciate you guys and gals watch my videos. Be sure to hit that like button and the subscribe button if you enjoy the content. And as always, keep watching.